If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by two best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. Hello and welcome to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and today I'm delighted to welcome Emily Warren, founder of Little Fox Education and a passionate advocate for the transformative power of play. With a background in teaching and behaviour support, Emily now focuses on helping children with additional needs through tutoring, family support and attachment-based play. We'll dive into Emily's journey, why play is essential for children's growth and healing, and how it can bridge the gap between challenges and potential. So, Emily, thank you very much for joining us and Happy New Year to you.
Thank you and Happy New Year to you. I'm really excited to be on this podcast today. Really excited.
Okay, so delving into a little bit, and obviously you started, I think you started your career like teaching science workshops. Is that the case? So were you actually a teacher or were you actually teaching, what kind of thing was it? Tell me about that to start off with.
It was one of those really great things that I never expected to happen to me. So I was at university actually doing events management and marketing, and you have to do a placement year. And I got placed at this really random franchise called Mad Science, which is actually a global science education provider doing workshops, birthday parties and that sort of thing. And in the mornings, I would do all of their events and marketing for the whole of the southwest of the UK. But in the afternoon, they said, look, we really need more people to go out and teach. I was not a qualified teacher by any means, had no background of working with children. And I went out and started doing it. And I just absolutely loved it. I was like, this is great fun. And there was a teacher that I was in a school, and she stopped me at the end and said, "Oh, are you a qualified teacher?" And I said, "Oh, no, I just started doing this about a year ago." And she said, "You should really become a teacher." And then that was it for me. Events management went out the window, and I took a whole new career path. And you've only got to have one person, haven't you? You know, say something, and it can totally change your life. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I've had similar things happen to me as well. So do you think, obviously, that's, I think I kind of know what you're referring to as kind of the sciencey workshops that kind of go into schools and they just kind of do more activity and engagement days with the children and stuff like that. Is that kind of the thing that you were doing?
Yeah. So I'd go in and do after school clubs. So, well, I did a range of things. I'd go in and deliver these big, wowy, whizzy assemblies to schools to get children excited about science. And then I'd go and then deliver in the same school an after school club where we would there'd be, I think, up to about groups of about 10 children. And we would just do a different science experiment effectively every single week. It could be about the weather, could be about mixology, we'd call it. It could be about anything really to do with science, to get them really interested and excited about science. It came with a full kit. You'd bring the kit in and you would have to assume this mad scientist type character and teach them whatever the topic was that you were doing. And I mean, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing to start with, to be honest. I was really just making it up. I'm going to be, just fly by the seat of your pants type thing. But the kids loved it. And the schools loved it because it's quite hard to really get in depth in science. I found in primary school. And then when I became a teacher, I completely got it. I was like, oh, yes, it's really hard to fit the whole curriculum in them during the week. I see why they farm out and do more after school clubs and things. So that's when my journey really started, was this love for working with children. And it was so creative and exciting, and the children were buzzing, and it totally drained me. It was exhausting. I was assuming this sort of wild character. I don't even remember what my character name was, if I'm honest, but it really just sparked something in me about how great it was to work with children and to see the progress they were making. So that's when I became a teacher and went off and did my PGCE. Bit of a shock, though. It was probably one of the hardest years of my life, I think, doing the PGCE, but I don't regret it for a moment. It was the best thing I ever did.
Do you think, obviously, entering in through that direction, you've got such a connection, as we'll go into a little bit, around play. But do you think, as that was your first introduction to going in and engaging with children around education, do you think that's partly kind of guided your path from then on in a little bit?
If I had come to teaching perhaps from a more traditional type background, in terms of maybe my parents were a teacher, or I had a strong subject knowledge, or something like that, I think I would have felt quite differently about my actual teaching career and the way that I worked with children as a teacher, and now what I do now. It really built the basis for me around imagination. That's where it started, and that creative, playful approach with children. And watching the impact that had on them just in an hour's after school club was enough to go, this is what I want to do. And then when I became a teacher and it was very different, I think that then continued to shape my career towards, hang on a minute, there's another way here. We don't have to teach children in this specific way. And I think that's really guided me always towards being playful and creative. I think if I'd come at it from a different approach, maybe I wouldn't be a play practitioner. Maybe I wouldn't have gone off and studied play in depth and all the things that I do, and written a course and all that. So I definitely think it shaped me. And like I said, that one person to believe in me and go, wow, you're really good at this, is all it needed for me.
I found at school sometimes that you can have the joy sapped out of a subject when you don't have that passion, that play, that imagination and things like that kind of involved in it. And a lot of my study and learning happened when I left school, when I started to then come across people who put in books and put in some of the work and courses they did, this element of passion into the subjects that I was really interested in, that I'd never encountered, even within uni work and stuff like that. It was a whole different way of kind of learning and stuff. So I think I really could kind of connect on that journey was a different route than most teachers kind of are exposed to. So now, obviously, it says that we spoke on your biography, you went off and did a few things. You moved into kind of focusing a little bit more around behaviour and stuff like that, and supporting that within some of your teaching roles. Is that the case? And you want to expand on that a little bit for me?
Yeah, so when I became a teacher, it was a real shock going from this really creative, imaginative, playful approach, going into teaching, and it actually being really quite regimented. But then I started working in schools where areas of poverty, and schools where children were really at their last chance, so they were at risk of permanent exclusion. A mainstream school, and they really only had one chance left, so it's sort of like a three strikes you're out type scenario. So these children had what they would call, or we might talk about, behaviour problems. And I realised quite quickly there was a lot to do with trauma, attachment, and social work, and lots of other pieces around it, that behaviour was actually communication. And I had a really great team. I had a really great TA in my first year there, and then ongoing. I always had really great support. But we had to be very creative. We had to be very imaginative, and we had to be very playful with the ways that we worked with these children, because we knew if we weren't going to make it work, these children were going to be permanently excluded from mainstream education. And actually, we always thought that's not going to happen. And it never did. We always ensured those children then went on and continued in their education, which I was always very proud of. But it really led me down this path of trauma and attachment. So I'm starting to realise that the education system is quite square peg round hole at this point. We've got lots of children with SEMH, so social, emotional, mental health issues that are actually quite unidentified. And the system didn't really understand that either. So I did a lot of my own training, a lot of my own research. Myself and the team around me had to do that, because otherwise it would have just fallen apart. We would have probably fallen apart. So I spent many years working with classes that had high numbers of children who were very, very dysregulated, quite extreme behaviours, you name it. I've seen it all, done it all. And it was incredible. At the time, it felt incredibly hard and almost wore me down. But the impact at the end of the year that you had with them, to see the success, was just incredible. So I just kept going. I was like, this is what keeps me going, that the children always go on and can have the life that they deserve. Yeah. So I really started to learn a lot more about child psychology, around the science behind attachment, all of those sorts of things, because if I didn't, I wouldn't have known what to do, because there was no training. Nobody knew what to do with these children. It was sort of like, off you pop, you're going to solve this now. So yeah, I spent a long time working with classes and children that were almost deemed unfit for school, which I definitely think was one of the best things I ever did. At the time, it felt very hard, but really, it's totally led me to where I am now.
Yeah, I find it shocking when I first started going into, because I've never worked in schools. I've only ever sort of taught and trained teachers and stuff like that. And when I first started doing work with teachers, there was a certain expectation. There's certain stuff that you do in the social care sector of, being a foster parent and being, working in children's homes and things like that, where there's an expectation of understanding things like attachment and stuff like that. So then when I entered into kind of working with teachers and schools, I was genuinely shocked that teachers do not get any training in attachment and understanding developmental trauma. I mean, they barely get any training in neurodiversity as a whole. But as far as and I found it incredibly shocking that you've got these people who are desperately trying to connect and desperately try and help children and carve the path out for the rest of their life, but they're not even understanding the foundations that those children have potentially come from. And it just makes no sense to me whatsoever. Have you found that quite shocking? There's obviously you went and did your own research, but
I think I was lucky. I'm grateful is the right word. I'm grateful that I'm a very tenacious, determined person that has this passion. Otherwise, and in my day job now, as well as running my company, I work with mainstream schools to support them with SEN and SEMH. And I started teaching 20 years ago. And it's still the same. There is still a real lack of knowledge around attachment and just behavior is communication, just that really basic piece. Even if we're not talking attachment, we're just talking behavior is communication. We still have teachers, TAs, schools that really want to understand but lack the time, or don't realise that this is something that they should know. And it's very frustrating, but that's what makes me do what I do, because I think it should be common knowledge. And there's always this friction between parents and school and social care and school, and it's really fractious and difficult and quite fractured systems. So these pieces of training and knowledge actually is what ties it all together. We're all working towards a common goal, but if everybody knew more around child psychology, around SEN, SEMH, neurodiversity, attachment, all of those things, they would probably work a little bit better together. But I find it very frustrating. And I think it's also frustrating for parents, I think, because also parents are not often told about these things either. You know, they get missed as much as teachers. So I'm big on education because we don't know what we don't know. And we can easily, I think there's a lot of blame around schools maybe not doing the right thing. But that's because teachers don't know, they don't understand, and they're just doing their best. So it's our job to educate parents, teachers, so even family workers. I went off and trained as a family worker as well, and even some family workers don't have this knowledge. So it is still quite shocking, and I feel like we're just about on the cusp of people realizing this is probably something we should all know more about.
Yes. I think there's definitely a movement in some primary school settings. I think secondary schools are going to take a wee while to get there, because I think it's so far removed that when they think children are attachments important, that you think, well, they're 11 now, so all that stuff, all that attachment stuff, that's all gone, that's in the past. And it's like, no, one, they go through a secondary period of attachment during adolescence, but also as far as, it's going to shape how they act today, how they see themselves, how they develop their identity over the next few years. So the hope is people like ourselves and some of the many other podcast guests that we've had and stuff we'll get on our soapbox often enough and somebody will start listening to us.
We hope, yeah.
So let's focus a little bit on play. So from myself, one of my favorite models that I've used within children's settings is PACE, which is a model from Dan Hughes: therapeutic parenting, playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. So play's always been part of that. I also have worked with and know a few play therapists and stuff like that. But I think play is something that most people kind of think as just a silliness. It's something, oh yes, kids play, but they don't necessarily recognize the importance of the developmental aspects of it and the importance around communication stuff. So what kind of introduced you, or what do you think are the most important things that people should know regarding play?
I could talk for hours, Andy, absolutely hours, but I will try not to make this a 7-hour podcast. Play is absolutely fundamental to our lives, children and adults. And we are seeing, we could call it an epidemic, whatever we want, of play being stripped out of children's lives. So there's a poll, actually, I'm going to quote from Play Day. In 2007, so this is quite a while ago, 71% of adults said that they played out as children. In the same year, the children that they asked, only 21% of children play out in the streets. So we're seeing that out in our streets, there is quite a fear culture around allowing children to play. We're also seeing in education, play is being stripped right out of the curriculum. There's much less playtime in the day. I think there was a study around in the 1950s, they had, I think, 2 or 3 times as much playtime during the day than we do in school now. So we're seeing play go out, but we're also now seeing a trend in mental health rising. So, for example, in England at the moment, I think 35,000 children are on antidepressants, and 1 in 10 children have a mental health disorder. So I'm not quite sure why we're not correlating this, but this is my job to do that. But the play is fundamental to so many parts of our lives. So cognitive, social, emotional, and physical are the 4 main ones that I talk about that are benefits of play. We've also got imagination, creativity, risk-taking. These things are learnt through play. We can't teach children imagination. You can't teach creativity. You can't teach risk-taking. Children have to learn to do that through open, free play. And it's really important that we give opportunities for this to happen so they can develop physically. So things like proprioception, knowing where my body parts are and how I use them, so that later on in adult life, they're able to go on and use their body to play sports or just being healthy is really, really important for both our physical and mental health.
We tend to think of play being one particular thing, though, don't we? And you said there about adults need time to play as well. And I think that is massively important. I was just having a chat recently about that. I've recognized that one of the areas I'm constantly looking at my life balance for my mental well-being and things like that. And one of the areas that I've recognized, although I am socializing enough, I'm doing enough exercise, I'm doing okay at work, and all of the boxes are ticked, the one that I've recognized that is actually not where it should be is my sense of joy, my sense of playfulness, my sense of silliness. And I sometimes refer to it, in like transaction analysis, sometimes referred to as the excited child, the one that has no responsibility. And it's just it being caught in the moment, in the flow of that sense of joy and wonder. And you sometimes see it in, adults. We even a silly game. I don't know if you've ever seen it with the where they slap each other with tortilla wraps and stuff like that. That's kind of kind of adult play, or board games.
How do you define play? I think something we need to think about is it's very difficult. I was actually reading a really great article the other day where it said, how do we even define play? I mean, there's lots of definitions of play, but play, like you said, it's not one thing. It's actually, there's so many different types of play. And you're right, I think play is perceived as often like, a board game. But that is play. But also, like you said, just being silly, that's play.
Yeah.
Going out and playing football, that's play. Going out, playing with your child and doing a dressing up imagination game, that's play. There's so many different types. It's very hard to really define. And I think that's sometimes where people struggle because, like you said, they just see play as, oh, my child just goes off and plays with their toys. That's one type of play. There's millions of different types.
And that's it, isn't it? It's the lots of different variations of play that actually open up those different routes, those different opportunities for development and things like that. And if it is just a case of sending the child off to go and play, then yes, there is some benefits to that certain type. But there's so many other different types of play that would also develop other skills and other abilities and things like that. I want to try and talk to you about, let's jump into a little bit. How important do you think it is for adults to be playing with children, as far as both parents and teachers?
Fundamental, absolutely fundamental. So one of the pieces of work that I do is training teachers, but I also work with parents and do coaching because it is fundamental to be playing with our children. But as adults, we don't actually know how to play sometimes, or we have our own fears, our own baggage actually comes with us, our own traumas, our own maybe lack of play, lots of different things. So as adults, we find it hard to be playful as adults, like we were just talking about, but actually we often find it very hard to play with children. Some people find it very natural, really easy, and they're the ones that probably work with children. So we have to acknowledge that actually playing with children sometimes can be really difficult. But if you were to play with your child even 3 times a week in what I call special time, the impact is incredible. So any of the parents that I've worked with, or teachers or carers or family workers, when they implement this, either with their own child or they teach somebody else to do it, 100% of the time they will come back to me and say, I've seen a huge reduction in unwanted behavior. Our connection is stronger. And sometimes it's quite hard for them to unpick why. We can do that together, that's fine. But the impact is always really outstanding. So if you can't do it every day, I would say do it every day. But we all know that life gets in the way. There's too much going on. So every day is a bit of a big ask. So if you could do it 3 times a week, even 10 minutes of just what I call special time, and this is the foundation of attachment play, it would if everyone did that, it would be life-changing. But you don't have, if parents can't do that, as teachers, caregivers, or if we've got any foster carers out there, it is life-changing, because the connection and the building of safety and trust that you get through play, you can't get in it. I don't think you can really get in any other way, because that's the way that children communicate. That's the way that they learn. So let's get to their level. Let's communicate with them in a way that they can understand, whether that's conscious or subconscious. So I think it's fundamental, and it scares me how much play is being stripped out of society, but also how many people are scared of playing with their children. That's okay, but it's my mission to change that and help people to understand, how can I do that and let go of my fears, conscious or subconscious.
I think it's what you said there is 100% true and important for people to be aware of. And I think just that lowering the expectation of just that 10 minutes of what you would class as play, where it's not about using it as a teaching moment. It's not about using it to correct the child or tell them what they should and shouldn't be doing. It's about, as you said, joining them in their world and finding a way of connecting with them in something joyful, something fun, for just 10 minutes. It would be so beneficial for a lot of parents as well. I think it's very hard for a lot of both professionals and for parents, as it is at the moment, that they feel this intense pressure that they're going through their lives, kind of having to tick all the boxes of, whether it be work, and then if it is coming home and then making sure all the housework is done and the food's on the table and the routines kind of followed and things like that. For teachers, it's I've got to hit the criteria and the curriculum and those sorts of things. So therefore, it feels like, I think sometimes we get caught in that headspace, and allowing ourselves to go, I need to step out of that headspace right now. I need to just go into I just need to be in a state of joy, is quite difficult to do. Is there things what do you do to help people transition into that kind of play state, we might call it?
So we really have a look at, how did you play as a child? And you can do this yourself without me. Just take 10 minutes to think about, what was my most joyful moment that I remember playing as a child, and just really focus on that moment and start thinking about what was it. And 99% of the time it's because somebody else was there. So it's rarely that you were on your own. Occasionally it is. So we start with that. We think about, what is my background like, without going too deep into the psychological part of it, but just picking out, what did I enjoy about that moment, and starting really small and letting your child take the lead is the easiest way to transition. So in this 10 minutes, you might start once a week. So really, if you're really finding it difficult, just do once a week, 10 minutes of special time. And there's two things you can do. Either let your child lead if you feel okay with that. So just go and sit next to them when they are playing and merely observe and just comment stream. Oh, I really like that colour block. Oh, that's a cool idea. Maybe ask a couple of questions. Oh, what game are you playing? How are you doing that? Just being curious, just starting with being curious can start to help you to go, okay, I feel a little bit more comfortable with this. This is okay. And joining in. Some parents or teachers say to me, okay, but all they like doing is video games. That's fine. Just sit next to them. Help be engaged with what they're doing, basically, and just ask a few questions, let them lead the way. The other thing that I suggest is building a special time box or a bag. This does not have to cost money, so please do not get me wrong and go out and start buying lots of fancy toys. Think about, what does your child like playing with? And this is a good place to start with. It helps to bring that curiosity and make that transition into, I'm going to play with them a little bit more. What do I notice they really like playing with? Is it cars? Is it Lego? Is it video games? Is it outside? Is it a ball? Whatever it is. And go to charity shops and just, over the course of a couple of weeks, put some things in a box that you've chosen for them that you think they will really like. And in that special time, you bring it out. And the joy the child has that you have chosen something for them that in itself, week one is just fantastic. And just sit and just explore the toys together, because that sometimes gives you a focal point rather than being like, oh, what should we play with today? Or do I have to set up this whole big Play-Doh thing? And sometimes that can get quite stressful. When you finished your 10 minutes, close the box and put it away. For the rest, don't let the child have it until it's back to your special time. And that's starting to build that real connection of, I'm noticing, I hear you, I see you, I feel you, and I've noticed you, and I want to connect with you. That is where I would always start, because that alone can have great power and build a really great connection, because the child feels that you've noticed things and that they're wanted, and I want to play with you. But it helps the adult as well to go, oh, I've got a bit of a focus here. I don't have to think of these big whizzy things. And, I've seen on Instagram this mum set up this amazing... No, none of that. That's great if you really want to do that, but let's keep it simple so that you feel calm and, you want to feel ready.
Let me ask you a question. Do you ever find the pressures of supporting, teaching, or caring for someone else overwhelming and wish you had access to more support and information? The Able to Care podcast, in connection with Able Training, has created the ablehub.uk, where for less than the price of a coffee a week, you can access exclusive podcast content, resources, events, and over 45 certified online courses, covering topics like self-care, understanding dementia, neurodiversity, first aid, conflict management, financial advice, and so much more, with new content and courses being added each month. We are so confident that you will benefit from the Able Hub that we are offering 14 days access completely free of charge. No contract, cancel anytime. Become part of the ablehub.uk community and gain the support, knowledge, and resources you deserve. Don't struggle alone. Be able. Find the link in the description. So, do you think for children who maybe struggle with traditional kind of learning methods, and especially the typical classroom environment, how can incorporating play make education more accessible and effective for those kids?
Such a good question, and I really wish that schools would make this a priority, but that's my mission. I will keep going with that. So if you think that, I've already said that play builds cognitive, social, emotional, physical skills, children who find the education system more difficult, so maybe we'll call it the square peg round hole, because it is quite regimented. And for me, my opinion is that the education system lacks that creativity. If we allowed play in there, you would have more room for creativity and imagination, and you would build those skills. So cognitive skills, for example, one of them is problem solving. Everyone's going on about, we lack children who can solve problems. Well, why don't we bring in play and then give them the opportunity to explore, and they would perhaps build more of those skills. I think it's about being accessible. Children can always access play. Sometimes if they've experienced lots of trauma, some children do actually find that more difficult, and we can help guide them with that. But once they've learned those sort of skills around how do I interact with others and play and free play and all those sorts of things, you will see them flourish in a way that they wouldn't be able to if you were telling them to sit at a chair and can you fill in this worksheet and write me a story about whatever it is, or can you solve this math problem? If we gave them a playful way to do it, maybe they would access that better. So I think there's definitely something around accessibility, because children learn in different ways. Some children have photographic memories. They see it once and then that's it. Some children like to hear it several times. Some children like to have hands-on. But if we're not giving them opportunity to learn in different ways, then we can't expect them to be able to access it. We're expecting all children to learn in one very narrow, linear way. And we have to be a bit more creative about the children that don't learn in that way, don't learn by sitting on a carpet and absorbing it and then magically going back to their table and regurgitating it. And then in a test, I'm just going to memorize it and write it down. That sounds a bit harsh. I was a teacher for a long time, but
yeah,
if we were if we gave them a playful way to present their work, they would absolutely fly. And that's why I do the tuition as well, because there's lots of children that just can't learn that way. But if you give them a playful way to do it, you just see them soar, because they're able to demonstrate their skills and access it in a totally different way.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, it's one of those that just does seem so obvious from an external point of view. As far as, we all know how. I mean, I'm a trainer and teacher myself, and I know that if I can get a group emotionally engaged in a subject in the slightest, whether that be to, feel awkward because of a bit of cognitive dissonance, or to feel slightly sad, or to feel annoyed, or to feel happy or joy. It doesn't matter. The emotion is something that helps to retain information for far longer. And play is an amazing way of creating joy. So there just seems almost a common sense to it. There seems to be this, and I think it's parents as well, and I don't think it's parents coming from a bad place, but there's this real societal dichotomy, isn't there, as far as we want, children should be allowed to be children for longer. We expect them to grow up quicker, and we shouldn't do that. But the very same people who say that very same thing are also then going, but they need to grow up and they need to do this, and we need to put more kind of pressure on them academically and stuff like that. Do you think there is this societal restriction? You mentioned some things there, not letting children play out in the street. And I think we spoke about maybe last time, that's because we used to be raised by the village, and it used to be, sister was over the road and auntie down the street. And therefore all the kids were being looked out for by the family, and you were friends with your neighbor because you called them auntie, even though they weren't related, because everybody kind of watched out for each other. But do you think there's other factors that have impacted on people's ability to play or encouragement of play at all?
I think there's lots of different things. I think our society is in a very different place. I think that there's a lot to do. I know that this is a real hot topic, but there is a lot to do with media, social media, the rise of technology. There's a lot to do with our inability to focus and inability to not be reliant on our technology, which actually gets in the way of our play. I think that like you said, that our society works in a different way. We're much more fractured. We have more opportunities now, which is really great. The opportunities I've had are just fantastic. I can go anywhere. I can do anything. I could fly to Dubai tomorrow, I don't know, and do whatever it is that I want. So there's almost this feeling around you can do whatever you want because you have the technology, the power, you can rise from the depths of nothing to being a millionaire. There's all this kind of stuff around that, which is really empowering and great, but it's almost overwhelming. So I think children and young people nowadays almost don't really know what to do because it's almost too much too easy on a plate in a way. I know there's lots of counter arguments for that, but we've got a lot more choice, I think, now. We've got a lot more choice. But I think that is almost taking its focus is more towards sort of academic and career and things like that. Like you were saying, like, don't let our children grow up too soon, but almost if they don't have the academic and those underlying pieces, well, all these chances and choices and opportunities that are really overwhelming and I can do whatever I want, you almost feel like you can't do any of them.
Just thinking off the top of my head, there's an element of, because we've got access to so much information, we don't spend enough time focusing on what's around us right here and now. We're too busy focusing on the world that's further away from us. And also we're so busy looking for far in the future, we're forgetting to be in the moment, which is what play is all about, isn't it? It's being in the moment. And moments like that kind of, that we're too future focused for one, or past focused sometimes for people, but also because we're also distance focused, what's going on the other side of the world and when's my holiday going to be over there, rather than what am I going to do with my kid today? From a teacher's point of view, though, I think a lot of teachers do feel like their hands are tied as far as, your primary school, as I've said, and we've spoken about, there's a little bit more maybe flexibility. But for secondary schools, I think there is this almost rigidity of, but this is the time they should be working towards their GCSEs and their this and that and the other. I think I remember, I don't know whether it was yourself or I definitely speaking to another teacher that one of my favorite books of all time, for instance, is The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien. I am a proper Lord of the Rings geek and stuff like that. It's okay.
Oh,
But one of the reasons, one of the reasons I fell in love with that book, when there was all these other amazing works of literature, but this one teacher, I remember we created a board game out of The Hobbit. And I still remember that this day of that learning the book to create a board game from it, learning that book to be able to turn it into play meant that I remembered that story and I remembered the characters and I remembered everything about it so much more than any of the other books I've ever read. So that's a great example, isn't it, of just turning something into play. But do you think there's a lot of teachers who struggle with that kind of thing?
Totally. I mean, like I said, in my sort of day job, we're working with mainstream schools in Cornwall all the time, and they really, and I was in this position too, so I totally get it. You've got so much pressure to meet expectation and progress and points progress and exams and results. Our education system is very result driven, and I really don't know why. It really does not need to be, but it is, but that's just my opinion. So it's something that really stuck out to me, actually. Someone said to me about Ofsted, because sometimes that puts I know it's a buzzword, everyone's going to go, ooh, and it really puts the fear of God into teachers. And actually a lot of schools are driven by that. What do I want to show that my school is amazing? And then they start focusing on very much around academia and results, because that's how you show it, I guess. How else are we going to show it? And someone said to me something, what was it? Ofsted do not tell you how to teach the curriculum. They are not coming in and asking you to have your marking in a specific way. And someone said, yes, they do. He said, go and read the Ofsted framework. They absolutely 100% do not. And that really stuck with me. And I always try to remind teachers of that. Ofsted don't tell you how to teach it. The children have to come out with core key skills and objectives, absolutely. But how you actually teach that is up to your school, up to you. So it's not Ofsted. I think there's a lot of sort of schools, maybe multi-academy trusts, where they have very strict and very rigid structures. And some teachers love that, because that means that cognitive load of what am I teaching today is gone. And then they can be creative within that. There are lots of teachers that don't like that or struggle with that. Oh, but I have to do it in this way, and I've been told to do it in this way. And actually, I think teachers need to be braver. And that's really, really hard, because you as a teacher, we are the most critical people. You want to be perfect for yourself, for the children, for the school, whatever it is, whatever your motive is for doing that. But you've just got to remember, nobody is telling you how to teach it. And if they are and you don't like it, you can change that. You can either speak up and be brave, or maybe go, I'm not telling everybody to leave their job, but maybe that's not quite the right setting for you. I think teachers need to be braver about finding their place and how they want to teach. As long as children are coming out with the key skills and elements that they need, because they absolutely do, fine, but how you teach it. And as I said before, there are so many ways you can be creative with the curriculum and teach it in playful ways, and they will come out with the same grade, if not better, because you didn't just try to drill it into them. But I know that it can feel difficult because you feel like you're fighting the system. But maybe try a different way, try a different approach, build your own muscle on that, and talk to your senior leadership about it and say, I would like to try this idea, or I have tried and it worked really well. And if they accept that, great. And if not, that's a whole other thing. But I think just having a go, because Ofsted are not coming in and telling you how to teach the curriculum.
I suppose there's it's reaching a point and it won't be long before it hits that critical point. There's so many teachers that are dropping out of the industry because they can't cope with this lack of connectivity with the children. It's so focused on that, it's overstressed, overstretched and things like that. But I think there's a different way of looking at this, that actually then they've got a unique opportunity, that there is a need for teachers. So that gives the teachers the power and the position to be able to go, well, this isn't how I want to teach, and this is how I want to teach, and we need to change the culture of the school. Or it's okay, I'll find the school that does meet its culture. So they don't necessarily have to just leave teaching. There is other schools that will have that same ideology, that same principle, that same kind of way of approaching education that they're hoping to, or maybe they got into the teaching to do. And that'll very quickly change the system if more teachers start going, well, I'm going to this school because they allow this free flow, this slightly more playful kind of approach, and we connect with the kids better, and I do what I always wanted to do rather than just ticking boxes and filling in paperwork and stuff like that. Yeah, 100%. So we'll see how that goes over the next few years, because the leverage is definitely moving towards them.
Yeah, I think it will change. And I think teachers are starting to go, hang on a minute, I do have a bit of a voice here and I don't have to leave teaching, and maybe there's a different way. And I think senior leaders are starting to think about it a bit more creatively as well, and noticing that teachers are leaving and how can we help them. So I do think it will change.
Yeah. And straight away, if you've had a few bits of play throughout the day, you've had a more fun day, and you'll probably then go home feeling a little bit more positive.
You feel better. Everybody feels better. The children will behave better.
Absolutely.
The attainment and progress of children will only increase if you build play. And that's a bold statement, but I can tell you it will work.
It is, yeah. I think we spoke maybe last time about a really interesting study, and I've never been able to find it again, but it was a newspaper article over in New Zealand, which I believe you've been to New Zealand, haven't you? That's just part of your travels.
I have, I lived there for a few years.
Hence the Lord of the Rings kind of maybe thing as well.
I actually did Lord of the Rings horse trekking tours. That was my job for a while.
Oh wow, I'm just in awe now. I don't want to talk about play anymore. I just want to talk about that. But yeah, it was a study where it was a school that was having some work done, where they usually, obviously, if you're having any construction work, you kind of fence it all off and the children can't go in there because what if they fall and hurt themselves and stuff. But this particular school just kind of opened it up and let the kids play in a risky way, in that they were playing with, stuff and climbing on stuff and stuff like that. But actually, the number of accidents decreased. It didn't increase. They didn't get more accidents. They got less accidents because children were learning how to navigate their own environment through play, through learning to risk assess for themselves rather than somebody else. It's like learning to cross the road, isn't it? You've got to help me to cross the road a few times to learn it. Otherwise, the first time I come across the road and you're not holding my hand, then, I'm in trouble, But they actually found that concentration improved, that the kids' ability to sit through the rest of the day, or their focus concentration was all improved as a result of allowing that more free play and more risk-taking, because it just exercising a completely different part of the brain, isn't it? And it's burning off that energy and the adrenaline and everything like that kind of, so it was really interesting. I need to source that study again and find out where it was and stuff. But
there's another one that there's a really good article around free play. I can't remember what it's called now. I think it might be UNESCO. Can't remember. If you type in free play literature review, it will come up. So anyone's on the call, listening to the podcast, go and read it, because it talks about how we need to have more free play. So allowing children just to do whatever they want. We're not guiding it. We're not setting it up. We're not engaging in it. We're just allowing them to play. And actually, why we need to do that. So that's a really good article to read. And there's a school up in I think it might be Bath or somewhere, that allows children, I think at least once a week, maybe more, to have real tools. They have saws and hammers and all sorts. And they allow them to use them. And nobody has cut their finger off, as far as I'm aware. And, they put in the guidelines and they support them with that. But I don't know any other schools that would allow them. They might do it, but very heavily guided in a DT session, for example. But this school it's free play in lots of different scenarios. It's not just I'm going and doing a forest school session, which don't get me wrong, they are amazing, but they just let them free play with all these dangerous tools. Honestly, none of the children have cut the finger off. So it's that risk taking part that we really lack in our society and our education now. So how are we expecting children to handle risk when they're adults if we don't allow them to take, even in our playgrounds, they're so safe now, and you still get pets. Oh no, don't jump on that. Oh, and it's really hard not to do that because obviously you don't want your child to break their arm, whatever it is. But you've got to allow them to understand their own body and their own limits.
Yes, and if something goes wrong, then everybody jumps on it. Unfortunately, that nothing bad should happen. That is the way society should be. Nothing bad should ever happen. But okay, so we've spoken about the kind of the benefits and stuff. But what is your favorite kind of play? Is there a particular type of play that you yourself enjoy the most?
Oof. That is a really tough question because I love lots of play. I really, really enjoy small world, what I call small world imagination play, where I let the child lead. So it's also child-led play, but you put out miniature things. So it could be miniature characters, dinosaurs, animals, cars, all those tiny little things you randomly just get hold of. And watching a child and letting them lead me and join in with that, I just love it because the creativity and some of the stories they come up with, honestly, it makes me laugh so much. They just come up, you just never know what they're going to do or what they're going to say or what's going to happen. But it's also really revealing as to what's going on with that child. So once you learn how to engage in this kind of play, you're sort of touching on a bit of play therapy type techniques or theraplay and all those kinds of things, which I think anyone can do the basics of. But sometimes it reveals a lot about what's going on for that child once you start keying into what they're saying, what they're doing, and how they're playing with each other. And it might not be anything bad. It might just be something you didn't know about your child. So, oh, that's nice. But it's really fun. I know lots of people find this kind of play actually really quite hard because it's almost you want to be quite rigid with it, and children just come up with all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But I find it makes me personally laugh a lot, and then that tension release feels really good for me, and it feels really good for the child, and you build a lot of connection through that kind of play.
Yeah, I like that. That's lovely. I think there's a few things as well that maybe are worth mentioning that I should imagine that you encourage. So one of the things I think you've kind of adhered to it a couple of times is kind of the empathic commentary you probably put into play as well. I think you sort of mentioned it. So it's kind of like narrating through. So if a character is doing something, kind of doing some reflection, some, the kind of therapy type skills, if you like, kind of reflecting on the emotions, going, oh, they're rushing around all over the place, aren't they? They're looking very agitated. And the importance of actually, you mentioned earlier about where the different elements of play come in, but that's obviously the emotional development of the child, kind of to helping them to understand emotions, connections between behaviors and emotions and things like that are all kind of being narrated from an adult to the child throughout that process. Is that something that you kind of teach and encourage and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's called reflective functioning, and it's on the very surface level. The first thing that I teach adults to do is that noticing. So talking and narrating what your child is doing. Oh, I see you're putting a red block on there. Oh, the dinosaur is going over here. Oh, it's the prince. The princess looks scared. Just literally narrating what your child is doing. So that's the first step of it. The next step of reflective functioning is really getting into your child's mind. So seeing things from their point of view. And that takes practice and that takes time, and it's like a muscle. You have to keep trying at it. But if I said to you, think about chocolate, what are you going to think about? Chocolate.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and
at
at least I haven't had chocolate for a little bit. So I'm on a diet at the minute. You just triggered me.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm really starting to think about what is my child thinking, and then the next level is what are their emotions at that moment, and really noticing it and starting to adapt your body language to that. So, for example, if they're playing and they suddenly reenact something that's scary, you can say that's really scary, but the next stage of that would be to physically move closer to them, to say, I've noticed, I've heard you, and now I feel you. And it is this deeper psychological connection that is subconscious for the child. So you start word streaming, narrating, then you start noticing their emotions, and you start reflecting that back to them. And then your body language also reflects that and says, I'm here for you. Or if they're suddenly really excited, for example, you suddenly get really excited, you're reflecting back their emotion, or you're supporting them with that emotion. That does take time and practice, but that is where you really start to build some of that secure attachment with the child. And they won't know that that's what you're doing at all. They just think you're playing with them. But it's really about those three things. I see you, I hear you, and I feel you. But you have to, through that reflective functioning is how you do that. And it builds that secure attachment with the child, to that sense of safety, trust, connection, deeper level connection.
I like it, yeah. And as I say, it's quite a journey for any adult to kind of be on, that needs to be kind of accepted that this is going to be a journey for them as well. There's something I'd just kind of triggered in my head. I remember reading something or a study or something on those lines. It'd be interesting to just kind of run past you. So I remember reading one time that when typically in a dual parent household, and it doesn't matter whether it's same sex or different sex or different gender, but typically the two parents tend to take slightly different positions as far as play is concerned. That one parent typically tends to take that the world should be okay for the child, whereas the other parent typically takes a position of, you must do battle with the world and you must be okay in this world and adapt to this world. And there's a bit of a kind of a combination of the two is really beneficial. Whereas obviously then single parents may have to do both roles just themselves a little bit. And typically the one takes one and one takes the other, and it seems to, fall into that kind of pattern. And when I'm kind of talking about that and teaching about it, I often say, let's say that I used to use Paw Patrol, but apparently that's out of date now, because Bluey apparently is now the new thing. But,
I love Bluey.
So imagine you've got a character from, I'm still using Paw Patrol. I'm old school now. But if I've got a character from Paw Patrol surrounded by dinosaurs, then one caregiver might typically kind of go, those dinosaurs need to leave Marshall alone. Whereas another caregiver might go, Marshall needs to stand up to those dinosaurs and tell them to leave him alone, don't they? And that slight difference is actually quite important to how children can kind of learn and understand those two, that there should be places of safety for you. But sometimes you will be on your own and you must do battle with this world and manage it yourself. Is that something you've come across? I remember reading quite a lot about that, and it always resonated with me, feeling something that's actually quite important.
Yeah, I think parenting styles are difficult to reflect on, actually. I think sometimes as adults we don't want to reflect on our parenting style. Some people are really open to it and some people are not, and that's okay. And I do think there's a lot around female and male energy, and there's definitely some pieces around that. And as a single parent, you have to actually adopt both. So there's definitely lots to do with that. And it is something I've come across in terms of how do I teach my child to take risks or problem solve or, deal with things that come up in the world, because we can't be with them all the time. Play is the great leveler. Play is the place where it doesn't matter what your parenting style is or what your view is. Actually, you can teach things through play, but and also be guided by your child. But the great thing is you can teach both things through the same scenario. So, for example, you might even set up that dinosaur piece in your small world play and have the Bluey character here and all the dinosaurs. but actually being curious and asking them the question, what do you think you should do? So it doesn't matter what my parenting style is. If you teach your child to be curious and have self-efficacy, where they are kind of learning that they can do it for themselves, that is how you can teach and kind of counteract the different parenting styles or help them to work together by maybe both parents will show them different scenarios. But if both parents were to ask them, what do you think you should do, and what and why and where and when and how, helps the child to build confidence in their own decision making, because we can't be with them all the time and we don't know how they're going to react to a scenario. But if you help them to build enough confidence in themselves and have enough self-belief that they will make the right decision based on what is happening right now, that will help them to go and more into the adult world and deal with scenarios, whether we think they should deal with it like X or Y. They will have the self-belief to make their own choices about how they should cope with it.
That was a great answer. Yeah, thank you very much, Emily. That was really good. Okay, so we're obviously coming towards the end. As we said, we won't try not to do a 7 hours. But obviously we would love to just touch a little bit on, so your organisation is called Little Fox Education. So do you go into schools then or work with parents? Is that what your organisation does?
So we do two things. Well, three things, I suppose, actually, technically. So one part, which is the original part of Little Fox Education, is tuition for children with special educational needs or social, emotional, mental health needs. So I work myself as a tutor, but I also employ other tutors who are specialised, and we deliver bespoke tuition to children that are struggling in any way. It could be anything really. And we deliver our tuition in very playful ways. So we are helping the child to be able to have that academic knowledge, but in their way. And so very different from the education system. But we also teach them skills about how can I take this back into the classroom, self-efficacy, all that kind of piece. So we do the tuition side. But I quickly realised when I first started tutoring, I was like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm only working with the child here. Actually, we need to have a holistic view. So another piece that my company does is parent-child attachment play sessions. So it's a 10-step program where we work one-to-one and coaching about how to play with your child. So all of the things we've been talking about today. And we talk about special time and the box. We talk about reflective functioning. But then we talk about, how do I use play to solve behavior issues? How do I use it in the moment? So there's very specific attachment play games and skills that I teach the parent, and they almost start teaching themselves to use to support them with their parenting, whether that's with difficult behavior or neurodiversity, all sorts of different pieces. So that's another piece of work they do. And then I also go into schools and I deliver attachment play training to teachers. And this has actually only just started, so I haven't been doing this piece for long. But I go into school and I teach teachers and support staff, TAs, senior leaders about how to use attachment play in classrooms and in school and in settings in order to support with attainment, progress and behaviour, and the transformative ways that you can use play. So I'm trying to do this holistic approach where it's thinking about working with the children, working with the adults that also work with those children to try and help improve children's lives in whatever way I can.
I think you've got some other things kind of in the pipeline and stuff. Are you working on a book at the moment, or is that already in progress?
Oh, yes. Yep. So I'm just sending it off to a graphic designer, actually. So I've got it's sort of like a workbook, a self-workbook for attachment play. So it goes with the attachment play program, which I deliver into schools. And actually, I would like to start delivering it to lots of other settings. So for caregivers, foster carers, that sort of thing. But you can actually pick it up and buy it eventually. You'll be able to buy it and just work your way through it. And it goes through the science behind play, the research behind play, all the different types of play. it's a very self-reflective book that you can work through, and then it teaches you attachment play. So even if you weren't able to come on to one of my courses or coaching, you could pick up this book and learn the basics of attachment play, and you could start using it right now, because the basis of attachment play is it can be done anywhere, anytime, and with little to no equipment. So it's not a thing that you need to start going off and this whole... A lot of people will be doing attachment play already, you just don't know it. So, for example, clapping games, the pitter-patter-pot, or my sailor went to CCC, that is attachment play because it's about building connection. But the book will hopefully be a pick-up guide and a self-reflective piece of work for adults to use.
Well, I'd love a copy of your book when it comes out, and, maybe an opportunity to get you back on and have a chat again about the stuff that you put together. So yeah, do keep me informed as far as the book, and we'll make sure hopefully we can get it out to our listeners as well when they get closer to that time. But that's
Great,
exciting, very exciting. Well, thank you so much for joining us and taking some time out on what sounds like a very busy schedule that you're about to go into to come and join us on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. For any of you who is listening, if you found today's episode useful or interesting, please like, comment and share. And do check out some of Emily's work and see if there's some of the courses that you might be interested or getting involved in your school, especially in that south of England. When you mentioned Bath being up, I kind of thought hopefully people realise.
I'm very far down in Cornwall, but yeah.
We said up there in Bath. I was like, that's not up there. That's really low. But yeah, so obviously that part of the country. But sounds like you're looking to expand the brand and expand your message out even further.
Absolutely.
But it's really nice having a conversation. So thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking today. I could talk for hours. So yeah, I really am grateful for coming on today, and for everyone that's listening. Thank you.
Right, wonderful. And we will have you back on again, I think, definitely. So thank you very much. Have you ever encountered an adult or child's behaviour that has felt difficult, overwhelming, or challenging? Have you sometimes felt at a loss of what to do, or know that you didn't handle it quite right? People are complex and unpredictable, and their behaviour can be like the weather. We've all made the mistake of looking out the window and feeling safe to wear shorts, but 5 minutes later wishing for an umbrella. But what if, like a weatherman, you understood how humidity, temperature and pressure all come together to cause the weather, allowing you to better prepare, predict and respond, and prevent ever having a picnic ruined by a thunderstorm ever again? My book, called Targeting the Positive with Behaviours that Challenge, helps you to become the weatherman of behaviour. It provides you with a toolkit to increase competency, confidence, resilience and empathy, so you feel more assured about how to respond to distressed or dysregulated behaviours in others, including those affected by trauma, mental health, neurodiversity, learning disabilities or dementia. Build better connections, achieve de-escalation and improve outcomes for yourself and those you engage with my celebrated 6-stage target model, a step-by-step process to reduce distress for everyone. Discover my empowering, person-centered guide in Targeting the Positive, written by me, Andy Baker, available from online bookstores worldwide. Find a link in the description and order today.